house stood at the edge of a quiet, forgotten town, nestled between thick, towering pines that cast long shadows even in daylight. It had been on the market for years, passed over by buyers who felt something they couldn't quite explain, a chill in the air, an unease that settled in their bones. But to Thomas and Evelyn Carter it was perfect, a fresh start, a sanctuary away from the noise of the city. The real estate agent had been eager to close the deal, offering it at a price far below market value, mentioning something vague about the last owners leaving abruptly. It didn't matter. The Carters signed the papers without hesitation. Moving day arrived with the hush of an overcast sky, gray clouds hanging low, pressing against the treetops, boxes stacked in the hallway, furniture wrapped in plastic, the scent of old wood mingling with dust. The house had character. That was certain. The floors creaked beneath their steps. The walls bore scratches and stains whose origins had long been forgotten. But it had space. It had charm. It had potential. It wasn't until the first night that Evelyn heard it. A sound barely perceptible, like breath slipping through cracks. She sat up in bed, straining to listen, but the room was still. Only the wind outside, only the settling of an old house. She turned over, dismissing it as her imagination, as exhaustion from the move playing tricks on her. But the next night she heard it again. It was soft at first, a murmur that could have been mistaken for the wind, except the wind didn't whisper words. She couldn't make them out, only the rhythm of speech, voices tangled together, rising and falling. She sat up again, staring into the dark, her heart pressing against her ribs. Thomas slept beside her undisturbed. She reached out, shaking him gently, but as soon as his eyes fluttered open, the whispers stopped. "It's nothing," he mumbled, pulling the blankets tighter. Maybe it was. Maybe she was imagining things. Days passed, filled with unpacking, arranging, making the house feel like home. Evelyn tried to forget the whispers, pushing them to the back of her mind. But each night they returned, louder, closer. She began to notice other things. The way the air in certain rooms felt heavy, damp. The way shadows seemed to stretch just a little too far when the lights went out. The way the house seemed to breathe, a slow, steady inhale and exhale beneath the floorboards. One night, she followed the whispers. Slipping out of bed, careful not to wake Thomas, she crept down the hall, her bare feet soundless against the wooden floor. The sound guided her, pulling her toward the end of the corridor, where a single door stood, the guest room. She hesitated, fingers resting on the cold brass handle. The door wasn't locked, but it didn't open easily, as though something resisted on the other side. With effort, she pushed it open, the hinges groaning in protest. The room was empty, just a bed and a dresser, a single window overlooking the trees. Nothing out of place, but the whispers. They were here, pressing her ear to the wall. She listened. Voices, hushed but frantic, speaking over one another, weaving together like a tangled web. She couldn't make out the words, but she felt them. Felt the urgency, the desperation. Then, beneath the voices, something else. A scratching. A slow, deliberate scrape, as if something behind the walls was trying to get out. She stumbled back, slamming the door shut. For the rest of the night she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, heart pounding, waiting for the whispers to return. They did. They always did. The next morning she told Thomas. He laughed at first, brushing it off as an overactive imagination, as the natural creaks and groans of an old house settling. But he saw the look in her eyes, the way her hands trembled as she gripped her coffee cup. He promised to check it out to put her mind at ease. That evening, they stood in the guest room together. The air felt thick, charged with something unseen. Evelyn pointed to the spot where she had heard the whispers, the scratching. Thomas knocked against the wall, hollow. He frowned, knocking again, moving along the surface. Then he paused. A section near the corner sounded different, denser. There might be something behind here, he muttered, stepping back, considering. The idea of something hidden within the walls made Evelyn's skin crawl. A crawl space, old insulation, something left behind by previous owners. The whispers seemed to grow louder, as if protesting. That night, Evelyn barely slept. The voices were stronger now, pressing against the silence, urgent, insistent. She buried her head beneath the blankets, squeezing her eyes shut, trying to shut them out. But then the scratching began again, and this time it didn't stop. The next morning, Evelyn woke to the sound of scratching, faint but constant. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't her imagination. It was real. The whispers, too, had returned, louder now, urgent, filling the house like an unseen presence pressing against the walls. She lay still, listening, her breath shallow. The sound came from the guest room again, from that same spot in the corner. Thomas had already left for work and she was alone. But the house didn't feel empty. It felt alive, shifting and stirring with things she couldn't see. She forced herself to move, stepping out of bed, gripping the edges of her sweater as she padded down the hallway. The door to the guest room stood slightly open, as if inviting her in. She hadn't left it like that. Inside, the air was thick, unmoving. The scratching stopped the moment she entered, but the whispers didn't. They lingered, hovering just beyond the edge of comprehension. A dozen voices speaking at once, overlapping, frantic. She pressed her hand against the wall. It was cold, colder than it should have been. She knocked. The sound was hollow, except in that one section, the part Thomas had noticed. There, it was different, dense, solid, as if something was behind it. A shudder ran through her. She left the room, shutting the door behind her, locking it. But even as she walked away, she could still hear them, muffled but insistent, pressing through the walls. When Thomas came home that evening, she told him about the scratching, about the voices. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's just an old house, Ev." But she saw the hesitation in his eyes, the way his fingers tapped against the table, the way his jaw tensed. He didn't believe what he was saying. They stood in the guest room together again, this time with a flashlight and a small hammer. Thomas knocked along the wall, pausing at the section that didn't sound right. "It's not solid," he murmured. "It's covered up." A hollow space behind the wall, something sealed away. He hesitated, then swung the hammer. The drywall cracked, a fine line splitting through the paint. Another hit, and a chunk fell away, revealing darkness beyond. The air that seeped out was wrong, stale, thick, carrying the scent of rot and damp. Evelyn stepped back, her breath catching. Thomas reached in, feeling around. His fingers brushed against something. Wood, old, rough planks, a hidden door. They looked at each other. Without a word, Thomas pulled at the edge, forcing the panel free. A gap opened, revealing a passage beyond. It was narrow, just wide enough for a person to slip through, leading into the unknown darkness behind the walls. The whispers surged, rising like a chorus, surrounding them. Evelyn clutched Thomas's arm. "We shouldn't." But he was already reaching for his phone, switching on the flashlight, stepping closer. Dust swirled in the beam of light, revealing a corridor lined with wooden beams, stretching deeper than it should have. It didn't make sense. The house wasn't big enough for this space to exist. A shiver ran down Evelyn's spine. "Hello," Thomas called, his voice swallowed by the silence. The whispers stopped, and then something moved. Soft shuffling, barely there, just beyond the reach of the light. Evelyn's stomach twisted. "Let's go," she whispered, pulling at Thomas's sleeve. He hesitated. Then, finally he nodded. They pushed the panel back into place, sealing the passage, covering the hole with a piece of furniture. But the house felt different now. It had let them see something it hadn't meant to, and it wasn't happy. That night the whispers didn't just return. They screamed. Evelyn woke gasping, heart pounding as the voices filled the air. No longer murmurs, but wails, sobs, desperate cries tangled together. Something pounded from inside the walls. She clutched at Thomas, shaking him awake. The sound came from the guest room. Boom, boom, boom. Like fists slamming against wood, trying to break free. And beneath it, the scratching. Constant. Clawing. Something was inside. They stayed up the rest of the night, huddled together in the living room, lights on, waiting for morning. When the first light of dawn crept through the windows, the house fell silent again. But the damage was done. Evelyn couldn't stay another night without knowing, without understanding. The whispers weren't just echoes of the past. They were warnings. And whatever was behind that wall wasn't dead. The morning light did little to dispel the weight pressing down on the house. The air remained thick, charged with something unseen, something waiting. Evelyn and Thomas sat in the kitchen, drained, staring at the untouched cups of coffee in front of them. Neither spoke for a long time. The silence felt unnatural, stretched too thin, as if the house itself was listening. Thomas broke first. "We need to open it." Evelyn looked at him, exhaustion carved into her face. "We already did. Not enough." His voice was steady, but his hands weren't. His fingers tapped against the table, restless, betraying the fear neither of them wanted to name. He was right. Whatever was behind that wall, whatever was inside the house, wasn't going to stop. Not until they faced it. The thought made her stomach churn. But the alternative, another night like the last, was worse. Without another word, they moved. Back to the guest room. Back to the wall. The furniture scraped against the floor as they pushed it aside, revealing the jagged hole from the night before. Dust still clung to the edges, the air stale and thick with rot. Thomas grabbed a crowbar. The whispers stirred, voices twisting, overlapping, frantic. Evelyn braced herself as he wedged the crowbar into the opening and pulled. The hidden door groaned, resisting, as if something inside was holding it shut. But with a final splintering crack, the barrier gave way. Darkness gaped before them. A tunnel stretched beyond, too deep for the size of the house, impossibly long. The flashlight's beam barely touched the walls, revealing only rough wood, damp stone, and something that glistened in the dark. A smell rolled out, thick and putrid. Decay. Evelyn gagged, pressing a hand to her mouth. Thomas swallowed hard. "We go together." She didn't want to, but she nodded. One step inside, and the air changed. It was colder here, heavy with something more than dust. The walls felt too close, the tunnel pressing inward, suffocating. The whispers followed them, hushed, insistent. Then came the scratching, faint at first, then closer, clawing at the walls, at the floor. Evelyn's breath hitched as the beam of light passed over something ahead. A shape, half buried in the dirt. A hand, rotting, the skin stretched too tight over bone, the fingers curled into claws. A body. No, bodies, lined along the walls, wrapped in brittle fabric. Some only bones, others fresher. Evelyn stumbled back, bile rising in her throat. A breath, not hers, not Thomas's, something else. The light flickered, catching movement at the edge of the beam. A figure stood just beyond the reach of the light. Not a ghost, not a memory, something alive, tall, wrong, its limbs too long, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. It didn't move, but it was watching. The scratching grew louder. Evelyn's pulse roared in her ears. Then, it stepped forward. The flashlight sputtered out. Darkness swallowed them. The whispers became screams. Something rushed at them, fast, too fast. Evelyn grabbed Thomas, pulling, running, stumbling through the passage as the air around them exploded with sound, wailing, clawing, pounding. The thing was behind them, its breath hot against her neck. They lunged for the opening, crashing through, slamming the hidden door shut. The pounding didn't stop. It slammed against the wood, against the walls, the entire house shuddering under the force. Evelyn grabbed Thomas's hand. "We have to leave." He nodded, already moving. They ran, through the hallway, down the stairs, past the rooms that no longer felt like home. The front door was stuck. The house wouldn't let them go. The whispers screamed now, voices overlapping, desperate. Thomas threw his weight against the door. Wood splintered. One final shove. It gave way. They stumbled into the open air, gasping, the house looming behind them, silent, watching. Then, the whispering stopped. The house exhaled, and the door swung shut. The pounding ceased. But Evelyn knew it wasn't over. The house wasn't empty, and it never would be.